I spent my life being the responsible daughter, the one who never asked for anything. Then at my engagement party, my parents announced they were giving my entire wedding fund to my sister. I just smiled, because I'd already moved the money, and what happened next left them speechless. I'm Elise, I'm 28, and until this year, I would have told you my family was supportive, tight-knit, even. We were never the picture-perfect bunch, but I always thought we had each other's backs. I was the responsible one, the planner, the fixer of the family. My younger sister, Heather, was the wild child. Always borrowing money, always in some sort of drama. But I figured that's what families were for. You helped each other. Or at least, I did. My parents always seemed to enable her behavior, brushing off her mistakes as growing pains. But I was the dependable one, the one they praised for being so mature. I didn't realize until recently that what they really meant was the one we can take for granted. My fiancé, Daniel, and I got engaged last year, after 4 solid years together. We weren't flashy about it. We'd been saving, planning smart, and keeping things modest but meaningful. When we told my parents, they were thrilled, or so I thought. My mom cried. My dad clapped Daniel on the back and said, "Welcome to the family, son." They offered to help with the wedding, even said they'd been setting aside money since I was a teenager for this very day. $40,000, tucked away just for me. I was floored. I hadn't expected anything. Daniel and I had already planned to cover most things ourselves. But that gift? It meant we could actually breathe. We could afford to bring some family from out of town, get a venue we loved, maybe even take a short honeymoon. We set a date, booked the place, and even sent out save the dates. Everything was moving along smoothly until Heather lost her job, and then wrecked her car, and then got evicted. She called me crying one night, asking if she could borrow $1,000 just to get through the week. Daniel was the one who gently suggested we say no. Not because we didn't care, but because it was never just once with Heather. And this time, with a wedding looming, we had to draw the line. I told her as kindly as I could that we couldn't help this time. That's when things shifted. Suddenly, my parents weren't returning my calls as often. My mom was cold, distant. My dad stopped asking how the wedding planning was going. When I mentioned the florist one weekend at brunch, my mom sniffed and muttered, "Must be nice to afford flowers when your sister's struggling to eat." I stared at her, stunned. Daniel reached for my hand under the table, giving it a squeeze. Still, I didn't push. I tried to keep the peace, hoping it was just temporary tension. I even invited Heather to be a bridesmaid. She never responded to the invite, but I figured she was just embarrassed or overwhelmed. I didn't want to make it worse. The engagement party came a few weeks later. Daniel's parents hosted it in their backyard. It was a beautiful evening, strung up with fairy lights and full of warm laughter. His mom had gone all out with the catering, and friends and family showed up from both sides to celebrate. Even Heather showed up, wearing a white dress, which raised some eyebrows, but I let it go. I wasn't going to let her throw me off. I was focused on the people who were happy for us, the people who mattered. About an hour in, after Daniel and I gave a short thank you speech, my mom suddenly stood up with a microphone. I blinked in surprise. No one had asked her to speak. She tapped it a few times, and everyone quieted down. "Can I just say something?" she asked sweetly, already in full performative mode. "We are so proud of Elise and Daniel. Truly. But we've had a change of heart about something." Daniel's hand tensed in mine. My mom smiled warmly at the crowd, then at me. "We've decided to give the wedding fund to someone who truly needs it right now. Someone who's going through a rough patch." Elise's sister, Heather. There was a beat of silence. I thought I misheard her. My stomach dropped. "She's had a hard year," my dad added, stepping up beside her. "We know Elise and Daniel will find a way to make their wedding work. They're responsible. But Heather needs a safety net, and we think this is the right thing to do." My ears were ringing. I couldn't move. Daniel turned to look at me, eyes wide in disbelief. I stared at my parents, trying to process the casual cruelty of it all. The way they announced it, publicly, at our party. Like it was some noble gesture. Like they were expecting applause. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking to the mic. But I do remember the stillness in the air as I took it from my dad's hand. Every pair of eyes now on me. And I remember taking a deep breath and smiling. "That's fine," I said, voice calm, measured. "Just one thing. I already moved the money last week." A ripple went through the crowd. My mother's face twitched. "What?" "I moved it," I said again, still smiling. "Since it was a fund for my wedding in an account under my name, I transferred it somewhere safe. Just in case." My dad's eyes narrowed. "Where?" I looked directly at Heather then, who had stopped mid-sip of her drink. Somewhere you won't find it. And that was when the yelling started. Heather nearly dropped her glass. You can't do that, she blurted out, her voice rising above the gasps and murmurs. That money was meant for me. Mom and Dad said. Mom and Dad don't control my bank account, I replied, still holding the mic, voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. They may have contributed to that fund, but it's been under my name since I turned 25. I made sure of that. Remember? When you forgot my birthday but showed up the next day asking if I'd co-sign on a car loan. A few awkward chuckles rippled through the crowd. Some people tried to hide it, others didn't bother. Heather's face turned a deep shade of crimson, and my mother's jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a molar. Elise, my dad said sharply, his voice lowered, as if trying to regain control of the narrative. This is not the time or place. Oh, I agree, I said, setting the mic down gently on the table. But you made it the time and place when you tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I love. Daniel stepped up beside me, placing a supportive hand on my back, and gave my parents a long, unreadable look. We were trying to let this be a night about celebration, but you decided to make it about your disappointment that you couldn't manipulate Elise anymore. Excuse me, my mom snapped. We gave her everything. We've supported her whole life. And I'm grateful, I said calmly. Truly. That's why I never pushed back when you made it clear Heather was the favorite. I kept helping. I paid her phone bill more times than I can count. I covered for her when she missed family events. I even stayed quiet when she stole from me. Heather gasped. That's a lie. I found my missing bracelet in your room, Heather. You borrowed it for a party 3 years ago and never gave it back. Then when I asked about it, you cried to Mom and made me apologize. There was a long pause. Everyone was frozen, watching. No one was eating. No one was drinking. It was just silence and tension, like the moment before a storm hits. My mom finally found her voice. You're being cruel. Vindictive. This isn't like you, Elise. You don't get to define who I am anymore, I said. I've been the good daughter for 28 years. I played by your rules. I took care of everyone, and I kept my mouth shut. But that ended tonight. I could see the ripple of discomfort moving through the room, but not in the way that made me feel ashamed. In fact, quite the opposite. A few of my cousins were nodding. Daniel's sister was standing with her arms crossed, glaring at my parents like she'd seen the show before and finally had confirmation it wasn't just her imagination. My dad tried one last time, a softer approach now. Sweetheart, just think about your sister. She's struggling. She's always struggling, I said, more quietly now. And you've always made it my job to fix it. But she's not my child. She's not my responsibility. She's your daughter. And maybe if you'd taught her accountability instead of handing her money and blaming me for her mistakes, we wouldn't be standing here right now. Heather looked like she wanted to throw something. Instead, she just stood there trembling, arms crossed, biting her bottom lip so hard it turned white. Where did you move the money? She demanded. Tell me right now. I looked at her for a long beat. I used part of it to put a down payment on a house Daniel and I love. A place we'll start our life together. And the rest? I smiled. I opened a new account in a bank that none of you know about, under my married name. So no, you won't be able to find it. Ever. Daniel gave a slight nod, and I could tell he was proud. Not just because of the money thing, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't let them bulldoze me. I didn't retreat or try to smooth it over for the sake of family. We're leaving, I said, grabbing my clutch. Thank you to everyone who came and supported us. We're grateful. As for the rest, I glanced back toward my parents and sister, their faces frozen in disbelief and something else, panic. Good luck. And with that, we walked out of the backyard, past the guests, past the twinkling lights and clinking glasses, through the gate, and into the night. We made it a full 10 feet down the sidewalk before I felt my phone buzz. First, it was a message from Heather. You're disgusting. You've always been jealous. Then another one, from Mom. You don't walk out on family like that. We need to talk. Then my dad, in a last-ditch effort. Please don't do this. Don't let this ruin everything. I turned off the phone. I don't know how long we walked, just holding hands in the quiet, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a daughter balancing on a tightrope. I felt like a woman who had finally stepped off and landed on solid ground. And then, 3 days later, they showed up at our door. Daniel saw them first. We'd just come back from the farmer's market, arms full of fresh fruit and flowers, the kind of weekend ritual we were finally getting to enjoy without wedding spreadsheets and vendor calls hanging over our heads. We were laughing, really laughing, about something ridiculous the cashier had said. when his face suddenly changed. He shifted the bags to one hand and gently touched my arm. "Don't freak out," he said under his breath. "But your parents are standing in front of our building." My stomach dropped. I looked up, and there they were, my mom, dad, and Heather, standing on the sidewalk like an uninvited committee. My mom was wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast, her lips pressed tight. My dad had that fake polite smile he used to wear at parent-teacher conferences. Heather was leaned against the fence, arms folded, eyes red like she'd been crying or fuming. I didn't stop walking. I didn't even slow down. "Elise," my mom called out. "We need to talk." "No, you need to leave," I said, walking right past them toward the door. "This isn't your home." My dad stepped in front of me before I could reach the buzzer. "Sweetheart, please. Just 5 minutes. Did you not hear me at the party?" I snapped. "Or was the microphone not loud enough for you?" "Elise," my mom said, her voice syrupy but tight with restraint, "you're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. We came to apologize." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You came here, to my place, unannounced, after publicly trying to humiliate me, to apologize?" My mom hesitated. "We didn't mean for it to come out like that. That's not an apology. That's damage control," Daniel said, stepping between me and my dad. "And you should have done it days ago, not waited until people started talking." My mom's eyes flared. "You don't know this family, Daniel. Stay out of it." He didn't even flinch. "I know enough." Heather finally spoke, her voice sharp and cold. "You're not seriously going to keep the money, are you? After everything Mom and Dad have done for you?" I turned toward her slowly. "You mean after I spent my entire 20s cleaning up your messes? Covering for you? Bailing you out of situations no adult should need rescuing from? While you got to party and coast and play the victim? That money could have saved me," she hissed. "No, Heather," I said calmly. "It would have delayed you, just like every other handout. And don't think I didn't notice you were wearing new shoes and a designer bag at the engagement party you couldn't afford to attend." Her jaw dropped slightly, and I saw her glance down as if she'd forgotten what she'd worn. My mom opened her mouth to jump in, but I cut her off. "You knew that party was important to me. You knew what that money meant to us. But instead of coming to me privately, or even trying to reason with me, you hijacked the mic and tried to ambush me in front of everyone I love. That wasn't love. That wasn't family. That was manipulation." My dad finally let out a long breath. "Look, we all made mistakes that night, all right? But we can fix this. Let's sit down, just the five of us. No yelling, no accusations. Just talk." I paused, not because I was considering it, but because I was genuinely shocked he still thought this was salvageable. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said. "You showed me exactly where I stand, and I'm done pretending that's okay." Heather scoffed. "So what? You're just cutting us off? Over money?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'm cutting you off because for the first time, I stood up for myself, and you all made that the problem." There was a long silence. And then my mom, always the dramatist, shook her head with mock sadness. "This isn't who you are, Elise. You're better than this. You don't turn your back on your own family. And that was when I lost it. You turned your backs on me years ago," I shouted. "When you made me the unpaid babysitter, the emotional punching bag, the default emergency fund. And I kept taking it because I thought one day, maybe you'd finally see me as more than the responsible one. But now I know, you never will. You'll always see me as the one who owes you." My voice cracked on that last word, and I hated that it did. But I saw something shift in their faces then. Not guilt, offense. Like I was the villain. Like I was ungrateful. "Elise," my dad said, his voice now cold and clipped. "If you walk away from this, don't expect us to be there when things fall apart." Daniel stepped forward again, voice calm but firm. "She's not walking away. You already pushed her. And she doesn't need a safety net made of guilt." I looked at them all one last time. 3 people I used to bend over backwards for. I felt not angry anymore. Not even sad. Just done. I turned, buzzed us into the building, and walked away without looking back. We sat in silence for a while after we got back inside. Daniel made us tea while I sat on the couch, trying to process it all. I half expected the buzz of my phone again. Another flood of guilt messages. But there was nothing. Just quiet. Until about an hour later, when I opened my email and saw the subject line, "Your wedding account, urgent." I opened it, and what I read made me shiver. The email was from the bank. Apparently, earlier that morning, just hours before the surprise doorstep ambush, someone had tried to access my wedding account. They hadn't gotten far because the security questions didn't match and they failed the two-factor verification, but it triggered a fraud alert. It wasn't hard to guess who tried. I immediately forwarded the email to Daniel, then called the bank's fraud department. They confirmed someone had attempted to impersonate me over the phone. Thankfully, my security protocols held. The account had already been frozen temporarily as a precaution, but now they were offering to permanently lock it unless I came in to verify everything in person. I made an appointment for the next morning. I was shaking by the time I hung up. Daniel didn't say anything right away. He just stood behind me, gently rubbing my shoulders. Then, after a long pause, he said quietly, "They're desperate. That's the only reason they'd stoop this low." That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt hollow, but not the kind of hollow that hurts. The kind that feels like finally clearing out a room that had been full of junk for too long. I realized then, the family I had loved so fiercely, so loyally, had only ever been loyal to the idea of me. The version of me that kept quiet, played nice, and never challenged their entitlement. But the moment I stopped being useful, the illusion shattered. The next morning, I visited the bank and transferred the funds again, this time into a new account at a credit union Daniel and I had just joined, under a joint account tied to our new house. I asked the bank to add extra protections, flagged my information with identity monitoring services, and made sure every password tied to the account was brand new and impossible to guess. By the time I got back home, Daniel was already in full "let's protect our future" mode, shredding old documents, updating our mortgage login, and putting together a folder of all our important financial records. And that night, I made a decision. I wrote a letter to my parents. Not a text, not an email, a real letter, printed and mailed. It said, "Dear Mom, Dad, and Heather, this will be the last time you hear from me for a while. After everything that happened at the engagement party, and after discovering someone attempted to fraudulently access my account, I need space. Space to heal. Space to protect the life I'm building with Daniel. You may see this as abandonment. You may call it overreacting. But the truth is, I've been abandoning myself for years to keep peace in a family that only ever asked me to shrink. That ends now. The wedding will go on, without your money, without your input, and without your presence unless I receive a sincere, unconditional apology. Not excuses, not justifications. A real apology followed by real change. Until then, please do not contact me. At least I sent it certified mail. I wanted to be sure they received it, and that I had proof I'd said what needed to be said. The silence afterward was deafening. A week passed. Then two. Then, out of the blue, I got a single text from my mom. "We got your letter. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. The wedding came 6 months later. It was beautiful, intimate, honest. No fake smiles. No walking on eggshells energy. Just people who loved us, who showed up not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. Daniel's dad walked me down the aisle, and his mom cried harder than anyone. We laughed. We danced. We toasted. We celebrated love in the truest sense. Love that's earned, love that's respectful, love that lifts, not leeches. Afterward, as Daniel and I stood on the balcony of our rented villa, barefoot and giddy with champagne, he asked, "Do you think they'll ever come around?" I thought about it. About the years I spent sacrificing my peace. About the party. About the bank email. About the voicemail Heather left me weeks ago, calling me a selfish traitor. And I said, maybe, but I'm not waiting. We clinked our glasses and looked out at the sunset, hand in hand. Because for once, I wasn't carrying guilt. I wasn't carrying anyone else's chaos. I was just Elise, free, married, and finally at peace. I'm 18, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the quiet one. The kid who didn't ask for much, who kept to himself, who got good grades, didn't make waves, and tried to make my parents proud in the hopes they might one day see me, not just as their son, but as someone who mattered. My name's Daniel, and this story starts 2 months before high school graduation, but it really goes back much further. Back to a childhood filled with whispered comparisons, tight-lipped dinners, and a sister who, for whatever reason, always sparkled more brightly in their eyes than I ever could. My sister Lily is a year younger than me. She's pretty, popular, and loud in the kind of way that makes adults smile and say things like, "What a personality." Growing up, it didn't matter what I did. If she got a B and I got an A, they'd ask me why I didn't help her study. If I won an award, they'd say, well, Lily's more of a people person. When I made the honor roll for the fourth year in a row, Mom literally said, it's not like you're curing cancer, Daniel. I used to brush it off, tell myself it didn't matter. That one day, they'd see what I was worth. That if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, maybe, just maybe, they'd finally say, we're proud of you. That never came. Senior year, I started applying to colleges. I did it alone. No one offered to help, and I didn't ask. While Lily was getting a new iPad to help with studying and going on weekend trips with Mom to tour high schools she'd already decided not to attend, I was juggling part-time work at the campus library, filling out applications at night, and trying not to collapse under the pressure. I didn't even tell anyone I applied to MIT. Not because I didn't think I could get in, but because I knew how it would go. They'd scoff. Say something like, that's cute, Daniel, but be realistic. So I kept it to myself. All of it. A few weeks before the acceptance letters came in, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. I remember it so clearly because it was one of the only times in my life they actually called me to talk. Not yelled, not lectured, talked. Dad had this look on his face, tight-lipped, eyes shifting, like he was already expecting me to make a scene. Mom didn't even sit. She leaned on the counter like she was just dropping in for a quick word. Lily was in the living room, pretending not to listen but obviously waiting for the outcome. We've been thinking, Dad said, slowly, as if he were testing the words. About your college fund. I blinked. Okay, Mom cut in. Lily's been going through a rough time, and with her grades, well, she's improving. She just needs some encouragement. My stomach dropped. I already knew where this was going. She wants to go to a private school in California, Dad said. It's not cheap, but it's a great opportunity. And, well, she has a future there. She's going to major in communications. That school's got amazing networking. I was silent, waiting, holding my breath. So we're thinking, Mom said, still not looking at me. Maybe you could give her your college fund. There it was. No apology, no discussion, just a decision dressed up as a suggestion. My entire life, they'd been setting me up to be the quiet one, the easy one, the one who could take the hit so Lily wouldn't have to. I didn't speak for a long time. I just looked at them. My parents, these people who were supposed to believe in me, who had never once asked what I wanted or what I dreamed of. Dad fidgeted. Mom finally glanced over, clearly annoyed that I hadn't just nodded and said, sure. You're smart, Daniel, she said, like that was the justification. You'll figure it out. Lily just needs a boost. That phrase, you'll figure it out. They'd said that to me when my bike got stolen and they wouldn't replace it. When I needed help with calculus and they didn't want to pay for tutoring. When Lily had a tantrum over not getting new shoes and they gave her the money they'd promised me for a debate trip. I could feel my hands shaking under the table, but I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just slowly reached into my backpack, pulled out a plain envelope, and slid it across the table. What's this? Dad asked. Read it, I said quietly. Mom opened it. Her eyes moved across the page, slowly at first. Then faster. She read it again. Dad leaned in. The silence in that room was deafening. A full-ride scholarship. MIT. One of the most competitive programs in the country. I've known for a month, I said. I was going to tell you. But then I figured, you'd be busy with Lily. No one spoke. Lily was still on the couch, frozen, her phone in her lap. Dad cleared his throat like he was about to say something, but I stood up before he could. I packed last night, I said, grabbing my bag. My flight's tomorrow. Orientation starts early for scholars. Mom stepped forward like she wanted to stop me, maybe say something motherly for once in her life. But she didn't. She just stood there, helpless and stunned. I walked out the front door, past the car they said they couldn't afford to help me buy, past the mailbox where I used to check every day for birthday cards that never came, past the flower beds Lily used to trample when she got mad and blamed me for. And I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I just kept waking. My bag wasn't heavy, but my chest was. Not from regret. Not from sadness, either. It was something else. Relief. Maybe. A strange, painful kind of peace. The kind you feel when a wound finally closes, even if the scar will stay forever. I got into the rideshare I'd already booked, looked back once, not at the house, but at the driveway where I used to shoot hoops with a flat basketball because we're not wasting money on another one. I watched the door. No one came out. Not Lily. Not Mom. Not Dad. The driver didn't say much, just nodded when I said the airport. I remember resting my forehead against the window, letting the sunlight warm my skin, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed in a way that didn't feel like I had to earn it. I landed in Boston late the next day. It was gray and cold, but to me, it felt like a new world. I found my dorm, met my roommate, a robotics prodigy from Japan, and unpacked in silence. Every photo of my family I had brought with me, I left in the bottom drawer. I didn't hang them up. I told myself I'd decide what to do with them later. They didn't deserve to be part of this new chapter. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Over the next few weeks, life moved fast. MIT was like drinking from a fire hose. Every class, every student, every moment was intense and demanding, but I thrived. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the background character. I wasn't Lily's brother. I was just Daniel. And Daniel was finally enough. But then came the messages. It started as a single text from my mom. "We're proud of you. Can we talk soon?" I didn't respond. Then a call from Dad. I watched the screen light up with his name. Let it ring. Voicemail. "Just wanted to hear how things are going. Lily's really sorry about everything." I hadn't heard her voice once. Not before I left. Not since. Then Lily herself finally texted me, weeks later. I'll never forget it. "Hey, sorry if things got weird. I didn't ask them to do that. I was just trying to follow my dream too." She attached a selfie of her on a California beach. Sunglasses, smile, and a caption that said, "Cali Life #future media star." No apology. Just a subtle flex. As if my college fund was something she earned by simply existing. Still, I said nothing. It wasn't until mid-October that the story truly came full circle. I just finished a late seminar when I got an email from the dean's office. They were hosting a dinner for new full-ride students, donors, and select families. It was meant to be this big celebration of our potential and the people who helped us get there. Every student was allowed to invite 2 guests. 2 seats. I stared at that line for a long time. I didn't have anyone to invite. Not really. But I thought of someone, Mr. Gellner, my old high school physics teacher. He was the only one who believed I could do something big. The one who wrote my letter of recommendation when no one else would. I emailed him. He said yes immediately. At the dinner, surrounded by polished suits and expensive dresses, I stood a little taller. The room was buzzing with conversations, laughter, the clink of glasses. A few parents gave speeches. One mom broke down crying while talking about how hard her son worked to get in. I clapped politely. It was touching. Honest. I felt a twinge of something, but not jealousy. Just distance. Like I was watching a movie I wasn't cast in. When I stood to speak, each scholar had a moment to say something. I thanked Mr. Gellner. Thanked the university. Thanked the people who'd shown up in my life, however briefly, and made me feel seen. Then I paused. My eyes scanned the crowd. "I want to dedicate this moment to the people who taught me silence," I said. "To the ones who thought I'd just figure it out. You were right." I did. I smiled. A few people clapped, not quite sure what I meant. But Mr. Gellner gave me a knowing nod. The next day, my name was on the university's homepage. MIT Scholars Speech Highlights Quiet Strength and Resilience. That same evening, I got another text from my dad. "We saw the article. Can we talk? Your mom's been crying." Another message from Lily. "Okay, seriously? That dinner thing? That was about us, wasn't it? Don't act like you're better than the rest of us now." Better? No. Just finally free. I didn't answer. I was done explaining myself to people who never bothered to ask in the first place. But here's where things took a turn. A few days later, something unexpected arrived in my inbox. A scanned copy of a withdrawal form from the California school Lily had enrolled in. And right below that, a GoFundMe link titled, "Help Lily Get Back on Her Feet, College Dreams Derailed by Unfair System." My stomach dropped when I saw the donor list. Guess who had already contributed? My parents. $5,000. $5,000. That's when something inside me shifted again. Not hurt, not disappointment, but something colder. Like I've been holding back too much, too long. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop. I started writing something public. Not a rant, not a cry for sympathy, just the truth. And it was time the world finally heard it. I spent 2 full nights writing it. Between classes and lab work and late-night ramen in the dorm kitchen, I kept coming back to that blank page. And with every word I typed, it felt like I was taking back a piece of myself I didn't even know I'd lost. I titled the post, when they said she has a future and left me behind and uploaded it to Medium under my real name. Not some anonymous vent, not some private blog. I wanted them to see it. The post told everything. How I'd worked for years while my sister coasted. How I'd built my applications in silence while they bought her ring lights and vacation trips. How they told me to give up my future without hesitation. How I left without saying goodbye, not out of spite, but because there was never really a goodbye to give. Because emotionally, they'd left me behind years ago. I attached a copy of my MIT acceptance letter, redacted my ID info, just left enough to be clear. I wasn't making this up. I even linked Lily's GoFundMe at the end. I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't tell people not to donate. I just asked one question. If she has a future, why did they think I didn't? Within hours, it started spreading. Comments came in fast, students, adults, even some parents sharing their own stories. One guy said it was like reading about his life in real time. Another said, "You've inspired me to apply to college again. I dropped out because I believed them when they said I wouldn't make it." A few people tracked down Lily's GoFundMe and started asking questions in the comments. Why wasn't her family fundraising for both kids? Where was their support when I was applying? Some even shared screenshots of my article directly on the page. By the end of the week, the fundraiser was locked. Donations disabled. The page scrubbed of any mention of me. And then came the voicemail. "Daniel," Mom's voice cracked. "What you wrote, it's not fair. You're painting us like monsters. We were doing what we thought was best. Lily needed the help. That money, it was never meant to hurt you. Please, can we talk?" Then Dad, "It's gone too far, son. Take it down. This isn't just about you anymore. Your sister's been getting threats. Your mother's not sleeping. Please." And finally, Lily, "I can't believe you would humiliate me like that. Do you think I wanted to take your fund? Do you think this has been easy for me? I'm your sister, Daniel. Or at least I was." That one stung a little. Not because I wanted her sympathy, but because for a second, it showed what this was all about to her. Image. Not family. Not remorse. Reputation. But I didn't respond. Not to any of them. Instead, I went to my professor, Dr. Harland, an older man who'd been at MIT longer than I'd been alive. He was mentoring me through a research assistant position, and I trusted him. I asked him if I'd gone too far, if maybe I should take it down. He just looked at me over his glasses and said, "Daniel, it takes a lot of courage to speak the truth when silence has always been expected of you. You didn't go too far. They just never thought you'd go anywhere." That same week, I got invited to speak at a panel on first-generation students and family dynamics. Someone from the article had passed my name along. They wanted me to share my story. Not just the scholarship, not just the drama, but everything. So I did. I stood in front of over 200 people, students, professors, alumni, and told them exactly what it felt like to grow up in a house that only had one golden child, and it wasn't you. What it meant to have to prove your worth over and over again, until you weren't even doing it for love anymore, just survival. After the panel, a woman came up to me in tears. She said, "I wish my son had someone like you to hear from when he was your age. Maybe he wouldn't have given up." That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time ever, I didn't feel invisible. But then something happened I didn't expect. An email from my grandmother. She's in her 80s. Lives in Florida. We don't talk much, but she used to send me birthday cards with $20 inside and always called me her little genius. The email was short, just 2 sentences. "I read what you wrote. I had no idea. You deserve better, sweetheart." She ended it with, "P.S. Check your bank account." I did. $10,000. No explanation. No lecture. Just action. I don't know what it meant to her, or if she'd seen the GoFundMe. But it was the first time someone in my family gave me something without making me beg for it. And that money? I didn't use it on tuition. I started a program with a few classmates. A mentorship fund for kids like me. First gents, quiet ones, overlooked and underestimated. We called it the Invisible Scholars Initiative. We launched our website, started hosting info sessions in underfunded high schools, offering mock interviews, essay feedback, and a small scholarship for one student each semester, funded from that original 10 grand. MIT caught wind of it and backed us. And suddenly, I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a founder, a leader, a name worth remembering. Back home, I heard through a mutual friend that Lily ended up taking a gap year. Said she needed time to heal from online hate. My parents? No idea. They've stopped trying to contact me for now. Maybe they'll try again. Maybe not. But here's the thing. I used to wait for their approval like it was oxygen. Now, I'm finally learning how to breathe without it. It was the middle of winter when the final act began, snow blanketing the sidewalks of Cambridge, crisp air stinging my face as I walked to the lab. MIT was quiet that morning, but my phone was not. It buzzed nonstop with texts, emails, and voicemail notifications. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the subject line that changed everything. You've been tagged in a family post. I opened the link, and there it was. A Facebook post from my mother, public, long, and dramatic. She'd written a 4-paragraph open letter to the world. It was carefully worded, drenched in self-pity, and just vague enough to avoid specifics. But I knew exactly who it was about. She wrote about how some children forget who raised them, how gratefulness has been lost in this generation, and how supporting one child shouldn't be twisted into abuse of another. She ended it with a photo of Lily, fake tears in her eyes, sitting on the floor with college brochures scattered around her, captioned, "Still holding on to her dreams, even with everything that's happened." Heartbreak emoji. Hashtag family is forever. The comments were predictable. You're so strong. Your kids are lucky to have you. Shame on whoever hurt your family like this. But not all of them. People had read my article, shared it, remembered it. Some had screenshots. Others linked it directly in the comments. Isn't this the woman who told her son to give up his college fund for the daughter? Wait, isn't the daughter the one who made that GoFundMe right after he got a scholarship? I read Daniel's story. She's gaslighting the whole internet. The tide turned in real time. I didn't even need to comment. The community spoke for me. Within 2 days, the post was deleted. But the fallout? That took a little longer. They tried calling again, texting, even emailing my student account this time. Dad wrote, "We didn't know you'd make it." That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. Mom said, "You embarrassed us, but I suppose we deserved it." Lily sent one last message. "Congrats on your little program. I hope it keeps you warm at night." It didn't make me angry. It just made me tired. I blocked them all. Again. But this time, it felt different. Final. 2 months later, I got another email, this time from MIT's Alumni Relations Office. They'd seen the buzz, the article, the mentorship initiative. They wanted to nominate me for a Student Impact Award at graduation. Said my work had already helped 4 high school students get into top-tier colleges with scholarships. One of them was from my hometown, the same school Lily and I went to. That night, I sat on my dorm bed, looking out over the snow-covered campus, and thought about who I used to be. The boy who sat quietly at the kitchen table while they planned Lily's future with my money. The boy who waited for someone to notice. He was gone. In his place stood someone new. Not just accepted, not just surviving, but seen, heard, respected. At graduation, I wore the same cap and gown as everyone else, but my name got called last. They saved my award for the end. As I stood on stage, the dean handed me a plaque. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed. I glanced out at the crowd, full of people who believed in me, who didn't even know me just a few years ago, and still chose to clap anyway. And I realized something. I didn't need to be part of the family I was born into. I built my own. One that never asked me to give up my future just so someone else could have one. I walked off that stage not just with a degree, but with closure. And I never looked back.